Hare Krishna devotees, welcome to our Sunday Srimad Bhagavatam class. It's been a while since we left off during Purushottam month. We were doing reading during Kartik month. We were reading the Krishna book. So it's been a month since we last met to read the Srimad Bhagavatam. We stopped in chapter 2 of Canto 1. But because it's been a while, we'll just take a quick tour through chapter 1 and till where we stopped in chapter 2, and then we'll continue with we'll try and do shlokas 11 to 15 of chapter 2 of Canto 1. So, Canto 1, in the first chapter, it begins with the prelude to the entire Srimad Bhagavatam. It begins with the definition of who the Supreme Personality of Godhead is, or in other words, what's the definition of the Absolute Truth? How Srimad Bhagavatam is glorious. It is the epitome of all religious practices in the form of worshipping the personality of Godhead, and how the author is inviting all of us to relish the Srimad Bhagavatam. So those were the first 3 shlokas of the Bhagavatam in chapter 1, Canto 1. And then from shlokas 4 to 8, we noticed that the stage is set. The place is Naimisharanya. Shaunaka Rishi, along with all of his associates, are welcoming Suta Goswami there. Suta Goswami is the son of Romaharshi Rishi, who was killed by Lord Balaram. And he was nominated to take the place of his father in that particular ceremony. So the sages have assembled there for 1,000-year sacrifice for the purposes of pleasing the Lord and also satisfying the devotees. And as per our culture, when a great personality comes in our midst, we're supposed to welcome him very nicely, give him a nice seat to sit, glorify him, and then ask him to speak. Here, of course, the sages were eager to hear the Srimad Bhagavatam from Suta Goswami. So from shlokas 9 to 23, the sages begin to describe the very abominable state of Kali Yuga. Although Kali Yuga had just started, but they start by saying this is a pretty difficult yuga for the Jivatmas. However, they are eager to hear from a great personality, a great devotee of the Lord, like Suta Goswami. And they pose their 6 questions. And it's those 6 questions that are posed, where in chapter 2, Suta Goswami begins to answer those questions, to recollect what those questions are. So question 1 was, what is the absolute and ultimate goal for the people in general in Kali Yuga? Actually, not even in Kali Yuga. What is the goal of any Jivatma? Here, Jivatma being defined as a human being. So what's the ultimate goal for every human being? What's the reason we've taken a human birth? So that was the first question. The second question was, what is the essence of all the scriptures? There are so many scriptures. It's not possible for people in Kali Yuga to be able to spend time, let alone reading, but even to understand and imbibe the scriptures into our daily life may be very difficult. So can you just summarize what's the essence of all of the Vedic scriptures? That was question number 2. Then question 3 was, why did the Lord appear in the womb of Mother Devaki and come as the son of Vasudeva? That was the third question, which is essentially, why did Lord Krishna appear? The fourth question was, can you talk to us about the Lord's adventures? What all did he do? Not just in his Krishna personality, but also in all the other avatars as well. So the Purusha avatars is the fourth question. The fifth question is the Leela avatars of the Lord. All the transcendental activities and pastimes of the Lord in some of his incarnations. Some of the incarnations are called Leela avatars and some of the incarnations are Purusha avatars. We'll get clarity on that as we continue reading. And then the last question was, once Lord Krishna left this planet Earth, this Bhuloka, where did Dharma take shelter? So these were the 6 questions. So in the beginning of chapter 2, Suta Goswami begins to respond to their questions, but he himself offers obeisances to the Guru Parampara. He glorifies the questions being asked by the sages. So that's also a very, very wonderful thing, an aspect of reciprocation. When you have been received nicely and you've been given a seat of honor and you are asked to speak, and the very intelligent people gathered there have asked some very pertinent questions, it's only natural that the speaker will also glorify the questions and the sages asking those questions. And then Suta Goswami talks about bhakti being the most important aspect in a human being's life, which is to answer those 2 questions, right? The first question being, what is the purpose of human life? What's the goal for all of us? And the second one being, what is the essence of all scriptures? To both those questions, the answer was bhakti. The essence of human life is to practice love of Godhead and offer the Lord's services. And the essence of all the scriptures is the same conclusion, that we should worship the Lord with love. And then we started reading about varnashrama and how, even if you look at our life from the lens of varnashrama, the same conclusion is drawn, which we will read the shlokas 11 to 15 as well, in terms of what is the essence of practicing varnashrama. So we will look at the specific shlokas today that we read, and then we will continue with shloka number 11. So today we will be doing shlokas 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15. If we have time, we will try and finish these 5 shlokas. So let me share the Veda-based screen. Just give me a minute. So Prabhu, you can unmute yourself once we get ready to recite the shlokas. Until then, we will just come back to chapter 2. Okay. So just to recollect the shlokas that we read last time, this chapter 2 is titled Divinity and Divine Service. So in text 1, Suta Goswami, who is also known as Ugrashava, the son of Romaharshana, being fully satisfied by the perfect questions of the Brahmanas, thanked them and thus attempted to reply. Srila Suta Goswami said, "Let me offer my respectful obeisances unto that great sage, Shukadeva Goswami, who can enter the hearts of all. When he went away to take up the renounced order of life, sannyasa, leaving home without undergoing reformation by the sacred thread or the ceremonies observed by the higher castes, his father Vyasadeva, fearing separation from him, cried out, 'O my son!' Indeed, only the trees which were absorbed in the same feelings of separation echoed in response to the begrieved father." So, what was unusual about Shukadeva Goswami is that after he left his mother's womb, he just walked away into the forest. But yet he became such a great personality, a great devotee of the Lord. without going through the proper processes that generally one undergoes, including the thread ceremony, etc. Let me offer my respectful obeisances unto him, Shuka, the spiritual master of all sages, the son of Vyasadeva, who out of his great compassion for those gross materialists who struggle to cross over the darkest regions of material existence, spoke this most confidential supplement to the cream of Vedic knowledge after having personally assimilated by experience. So, the essence of all Vedic knowledge was spoken by Shukadev Goswami after he had heard everything from his father. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of Godhead, Narayana, unto Naranarayana Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. We recite the shloka before we read the Bhagavatam. Narayanam namaskritya naranchaiva narottamam devi vyasam tato jaya udirayet. So, and in text 5, O sages, I have been justly questioned by you. Your questions are worthy because they relate to Lord Krishna and so are of relevance to the world's welfare. Only questions of this sort are capable of completely satisfying the self. The supreme occupation, dharma, for all humanity is that by which men can attain to loving devotional service unto the transcendent Lord. Such devotional service must be unmotivated and uninterrupted to completely satisfy the self. This is that shloka Savai Pumsam Paro Dharma Yato Bhaktir Adokshaje Ahaituki Apratihata Yayatma Suprasidati. It's a very important shloka. The shloka that says the only job we have is to, without any motivation and without any stoppage, to always be worshipping the Supreme Lord through the process of bhakti. So, this particular shloka and the next shloka essentially answer the first two questions asked in chapter 1. What happens by rendering devotional service unto the personality of Godhead Sri Krishna? One immediately acquires causeless knowledge and detachment from the world. So these two shlokas, 6 and 7, answer the first two questions posed by the sages. The first question being, what is the goal of human life? What is the ideal thing for a human being to be doing? The second question was, what is the essence of all of the Vedic scriptures? To both those questions, the answer is bhakti. Unmotivated, uninterrupted performance of loving service to the Supreme. And then from shlokas 8 to 10, Suta Goswami speaks about varnashrama. The occupational activities a man performs according to his own position are only so much useless labor if they do not provoke attraction for the message of the personality of Godhead. How do we understand this particular shloka? In this particular shloka, what is being said is that typically we understand the 4 purusharthas, dharma, artha, kama, and moksha. That we perform dharma for the sake of earning a living in the appropriate manner, in the accepted manner as per Shastra. So, dharma is used to properly perform activities so you can earn a living, artha. Once you've earned a living, artha is used to satisfy kama, which is your material desires. And over a period of time, you get disgusted with many, many material activities, and therefore you reject even that and go in search of moksha. Typically, this is how we have understood it: dharma, artha, kama, moksha. But in these shlokas, what we will read today, including the ones that we are just reviewing right now, the ultimate conclusion is that dharma has to be performed for the purposes of liberation only. We should perform our duties and responsibilities not to make a lot of money, not to satisfy all our material desires, but rather to attain liberation. That's the conclusion that is reached by the time we finish the next set of shlokas. But what is interesting is that, but if you look at this four purusharthas, dharma, artha, kama, moksha, it is different for people following different paths. So, for example, if you are a karmi, what is your dharma or engagement? Your dharma or engagement is to perform ritualistic activities for the purposes of achieving a different destination. But different destination, not in the spiritual world. In the material world itself, you want a different destination. You want a better life, a higher standard of living, let us say. Then for a karmi, their dharma is to perform all of these rituals. And then the apavarga, or the result is they want higher standard of living. Let us put it that way. They may want to go to the higher planetary systems. They may want to become a devata, etc. So what would be a dharma for a jnani? For a jnani, the dharma is mind and sense control. What is his apavarga? The apavarga is for him to merge into the effulgence of the Lord, Brahman realization. So karmi, jnani, yogi, and a bhakta. So what is the dharma for a yogi? For him, it is this Ashtanga yoga process: yam, niyam, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, then dharana, then dhyana until samadhi. And so, what is his apavarga? What is the result that he's looking for? He's looking for Paramatma realization. That is, if he goes all the way up to samadhi. If he stops somewhere in between, then if his attention gets diverted, then at maximum he can acquire some siddhis, some powers, the power of creation, the power of magic, and whatever else. So then for a bhakta, what is the dharma? For us, the dharma is hearing and chanting. And what's the result of hearing and chanting? It leads to prema bhakti, to always be remembering the Lord. So that is the apavarga for us. So different transcendentalists, the definition of dharma itself changes for them because their purpose and their goal is different. So, for example, if a yogi comes to the stage of dhyana, for them that seventh stage is bhakti. Dhyana means absorption, meditating on the Paramatma feature of the Lord. Whereas for a bhakta, the third stage for us is remembering the Lord. For us, dhyana is shravanam, kirtanam, followed by Vishnu smaran. So different transcendentalists have different dharma because their object is different. Their objective and their goal is different. But in the shlokas that we will go through today, it will become clear that the ultimate objective is actually only bhakti. There's no need to go through all of the rest of the processes. Therefore, in Shloka 8, Suta Goswami is saying the occupational activities a man performs according to his own position. So, assume there are four different paths: karmi, jnani, yogi, and bhakta. Are only so much useless labor if they do not provoke attraction for the message of the personality of Godhead. So, Suta Goswami is clearly stating, okay, you may be this transcendentalist and that transcendentalist, but ultimately, if you're not attracted to Krishna, then everything that you're doing is just useless work. It's a waste of time. And in the 9th shloka, Suta Goswami says, all occupational engagements are certainly meant for ultimate liberation. So the conclusion here in shloka 9 is the conclusion in shloka 9 is that ultimately we all perform dharma. Our only objective should be moksha, liberation. And of course, moksha also has varying definitions depending on what kind of moksha you're looking for. So they should never be performed for material gain. So the conclusion is that don't worry about artha and kama. Dharma should be performed only for the purposes of spiritual progress, not for material progress. That's the conclusion. So, right up front in the second chapter of the Bhagavatam itself, the conclusion is given up front. We don't perform our duties and responsibilities to gain materially. Rather, we perform our duties and responsibilities to gain liberation, it says here. But pretty soon, when we read the rest of the shlokas today, the conclusion will be the only reason you should perform the occupational duties is samsiddhir haritoshanam, actually only to satisfy the Lord, not even for moksha. But in Shloka 9, it is stated that they should not be performed for any material gain. Furthermore, according to sages, one who is engaged in the ultimate occupational service should never use material gain to cultivate sense gratification. So, even if you are blessed with a lot of um, Lakshmi, you're practicing dharma and you're earning a living, even if you are Karorpati, you should not use those funds to satisfy yourself. You should use those funds to satisfy Krishna. So that conclusion is also reached in Shloka 9. And we stopped at Shloka 10. In Shloka 10, life's desires should never be directed towards sense gratification, which means our desire itself should change to only that desire to please Krishna and nothing else. So here Sutta Goswami is saying life's desires should never be directed towards sense gratification. One should desire only a healthy life or self-preservation, which means you can earn as much as necessary for you to keep your body in good health so that you can practice bhakti. So one should desire only a healthy life or self-preservation, since a human being is meant for inquiry about the absolute truth. Nothing else should be the goal of one's works. So the goal should not be to construct a nice big empire, have so many properties, so much wealth in the bank account, etc. So that means it is not saying that you should not earn a living. That is not what Sutta Goswami is saying. You can earn a living, but you should not put yourself to so much struggle to earn a living just so you can increase your material desires. You can earn only as much as necessary to keep this body together, because your body should be fit enough, your mind should be fit enough to inquire about who the Supreme Lord is and pursue that path of the absolute truth, gaining that knowledge. So nothing else should be the goal of one's works. Which will bring us to today's shloka, which is shloka number 11. Vadanti tat tat vadvidaha
Vadanti tat tattvavidaha
Tattvam yajnanamadvayam
Tattvam yajnanam advayam
Brahmeti paramatmeti
Brahmeti paramatmeti
Bhagavan iti shabdyate.
Bhagavan iti shabdyate.
Word for word meaning, translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Vadanti,
Vadanti,
they say,
they say,
tat,
tat,
that Tattvavidaha,
Tattvavidaha,
the learned souls,
the learned souls,
Tattvam,
Tattvam,
the absolute truth,
the absolute truth,
Yat,
Yat,
which,
which,
Jnanam,
Jnanam,
knowledge,
knowledge,
Advayam,
Advayam,
non-dual,
non-dual,
Brahma iti,
Brahma iti,
known as Brahman,
known as Brahman,
Paramatma iti,
Paramatma iti,
known as Paramatma,
known as Paramatma,
Bhagavan iti,
Bhagavan iti,
known as Bhagavan,
known as Bhagavan,
Shabdyate,
Shabdyate,
it so sounded.
it so sounded.
Translation. Learned transcendentalists
Learned transcendentalists
who know the absolute truth
who know the absolute truth
call this non-dual substance
call this non-dual substance
Brahman,
Brahman,
Paramatma,
Paramatma,
or Bhagavan.
or Bhagavan.
Yeah. So we'll read the purport. The absolute truth is both subject and object, and there is no qualitative difference there. Therefore, Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan are qualitatively one and the same. The same substance is realized as impersonal Brahman by the students of the Upanishads, as localized Paramatma by the Hiranyagarbha or the yogis, and as Bhagavan by the devotees. In other words, Bhagavan or the personality of Godhead is the last word of the absolute truth. Paramatma is the partial representation of the personality of Godhead. An impersonal Brahman is the glowing effulgence of the personality of Godhead, as the sun rays are to the sun god. Less intelligent students of either of the above schools sometimes argue in favor of their own respective realization, but those who are perfect seers of the absolute truth know well that the above three features of the one absolute truth are different perspective views seen from different angles of vision. So, what we need to understand in this particular shloka, shloka number 11, is that the substance is the same. That is, the Supreme Lord is the same. But depending on your level of consciousness or level of realization, you may only capture certain facets of that same substance. So, for example, let us say we want to learn about an object. Let's say it's a gulab jamun. So somebody describes to us what a gulab jamun is. And you have heard what the description of the gulab jamun is. But somebody brings a gulab jamun in front of your eyes and shows you what it looks like. Somebody allows you to use your nose to smell the gulab jamun. Somebody allows you to use your touch and other senses to feel what this gulab jamun is like. But the best understanding of the gulab jamun comes when you actually put that object in your mouth. Therefore, you get the complete perspective. Not only have your eyes seen it, not only have your fingers touched it, not only have you smelled it, but you have also tasted it. You've also heard about it before seeing it. So if you have only used certain perspectives to understand what a gulab jamun is, then your perspective may not be complete. So the best understanding of an object called a gulab jamun is when you actually taste it. So here, Sutta Goswami is saying that an intelligent transcendentalist understands the true taste of Krishna comes when you understand all three of his features, which is the Brahman feature, the Paramatma feature, and the Bhagavan feature. Of course, the Bhagavan feature includes all three. So you get your best understanding of who the absolute truth is by performing bhakti. Whereas the others, the jnani and the yogi, of course, the karmi is not interested in Bhagavan. He is only interested in material gains. So the jnani and yogi is not considered an intelligent transcendentalist in the words of Sutta Goswami here, because they only have a partial realization of what and who God is. Just like if we only get to see the gulab jamun and never taste it, never touch it, never smell it, then our understanding of gulab jamun is going to be limited because we've used only one limited perspective to understand. The complete understanding of who the absolute truth comes when you actually practice bhakti, because those who practice bhakti are in direct touch with all three features of the Supreme Lord. So that is actually the essence of the shloka, but let's continue reading what Prabhupada is writing here. As it is explained in the first shloka of the first chapter of the Bhagavatam, the supreme truth is self-sufficient, cognizant, and free from the illusion of relativity. In the relative world, the knower is different from the known. But in the absolute truth, both the knower and the known are one and the same thing. In the relative world, the knower is the living spirit or superior energy, whereas the known is inert matter or inferior energy. Therefore, there is duality of inferior and superior energy, whereas in the absolute realm, both the knower and the known are of the same superior energy. There are three kinds of energies of the supreme energetic. There is no difference between the energy and energetic, but there is a difference of quality of energies. The absolute realm and the living entities are of the same superior energy, but the material world is inferior energy. So these three different energies we have discussed many, many times when we have talked about the Bhagavad Gita. The living being in contact with the inferior energy is illusioned, thinking he belongs to the inferior energy, which is represented by Maya Devi. Therefore, there is a sense of relativity in the material world. In the absolute, there is no such sense of difference between the knower and the known. And therefore, everything there is absolute. In the sense, everything is complete in and of itself. There is no difference between the name Krishna and Krishna in the spiritual. If you say Krishna, Krishna is there. So that is how the acharyas actually explain to us that in the spiritual world there is no duality. One can understand who Krishna is just by chanting his name. Actually, even in the material world, you can experience it. So let's come to the next shloka, which is shloka number 12. Tachraddhana munayah
Tachraddadana munaya
jnana vairagya yuktaya
jnana vairagya yuktaya
pasyantyatmani chatmanam
Pashyantyatmani chatmanam
bhaktya shrutagrihitaya.
bhaktya shrutagrihitaya.
Word for word meaning and translation by Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Tat, that, Shraddha Dhanaha,
Shraddha Danaha,
seriously inquisitive.
seriously inquisitive.
Munayaha,
Munayaha,
sages.
sages.
Jnana,
Jnana,
knowledge.
knowledge.
Vairagya,
Vairagya,
detachment.
detachment.
Yuktaya,
Yuktaya,
well equipped with.
well equipped with.
Pashyanti,
Pashyanti,
see.
see.
Atmani,
Atmani,
within himself.
within himself.
Cha,
Cha,
and.
and
Atmanam,
Atmanam,
the Paramatma.
the Paramatma.
Bhaktya,
Bhaktya,
in devotional service.
in devotional service.
Shruta,
Shruta,
the Vedas.
the Vedas.
Grihitaya,
Grihitaya,
well received. Translation: the seriously inquisitive student or sage, well equipped with knowledge and detachment, realizes that absolute truth by rendering devotional service in terms of what he has heard from the Vedanta Shruti. Prabhupada writes, the absolute truth is realized in full by the process of devotional service to the Lord, Vasudeva, or the personality of Godhead, who is the full fledged absolute truth. Brahman is his transcendental bodily effulgence, and Paramatma is his partial representation. As such, Brahman or Paramatma realization of the absolute truth is but a partial realization. There are four different types of human beings: the karmis, the jnanis, the yogis, and the devotees. The karmis are materialistic, whereas the other three are transcendental. The first class transcendentalists are the devotees who have realized the Supreme Person. The second class transcendentalists are those who have partially realized the plenary portion of the absolute person. The plenary portion is Lord Vishnu. And the third class transcendentalists are those who have barely realized the spiritual focus of the absolute person. As stated in the Bhagavad Gita and other Vedic literatures, the Supreme Person is realized by devotional service, which is backed by full knowledge and detachment from material association. We have already discussed the point that devotional service is followed by knowledge and detachment from material association. So, the byproduct of bhakti is knowledge and detachment. Jnana and vairagya comes automatically when you practice bhakti. So it gives you the benefits of, as we recall, when we were reading about the introduction to Srimad Bhagavatam, there is one pastime where Bhakti Devi is traveling through Bharatavarsha, and she goes with her two sons, and her sons get much older than her, and she doesn't know why. There is that pastime. So this jnana and vairagya is a natural outcome of performing bhakti, which means you don't need to acquire jnana and vairagya before you perform bhakti. It's a natural outcome of performing bhakti. We have already discussed the point that devotional service is followed by knowledge and detachment from material association. As Brahman and Paramatma realization are imperfect realizations of the absolute truth, so the means of realizing Brahman and Paramatma, that is, the paths of jnana and yoga, are also imperfect means of realizing the absolute truth. Because your understanding of the absolute truth is incomplete, and therefore the process is also imperfect. Devotional service, which is based on the foreground of full knowledge, combined with detachment from material association, and which is fixed by the oral reception of the Vedanta Shruti, is the only perfect method by which the seriously inquisitive student can realize the absolute truth. So, the bhakti process begins with hearing. So, without hearing about the Supreme Lord, how can you get attracted to the Supreme? Devotional service is not, therefore, meant for the less intelligent class of transcendentals. If you speak to the jnanis and the yogis, they will tell you the exact opposite. They will tell you that devotional service is the lowest of the rung because they put a higher premium on mind and sense control and intelligence and learning the Shastras. So they have a different view of it. But the Lord Himself has clearly explained in the Bhagavad Gita that the Bhakti Yogi is the highest. So we don't have to worry about what the other transcendentalists say about Bhakti. But if you do speak to them, they will tell you Bhakti is the lowest of the rung. It doesn't require intelligence, it doesn't require mind and sense control. Therefore, they believe because it is so easy, it must be the lowest on the yoga ladder. But that's clearly not what the Lord says in the 12th chapter of the Bhagavad. So, devotional service is not therefore meant for the less intelligent class of transcendentals. There are three classes of devotees. So, there are four kinds of uh, human beings, but there are only three kinds of devotees. We don't consider the karmi to be a devotee. Karmi is not interested in who the Supreme Lord is, who is the absolute truth. So, this particular purport begins with Prabhupada talking about four kinds of human beings. And here he is talking about three kinds of devotees. There are three classes of devotees, namely first, second, and third class. The third class devotees are the neophytes who have no knowledge and are not detached from material association, but who are simply attracted by the preliminary process of worshipping the deity in the temple, are called material devotees. So, even among the bhaktas, there can be divisions in terms of the maturity level of practicing bhakti. Material devotees are more attached to material benefit from than transcendental profit. Therefore, one has to make definite progress from the position of material devotional service to second class devotional position. In the second class position, the devotee can see four principles in the devotional line, namely the personality of Godhead, his devotees, the ignorant, and the envious. So, a second class devotee loves the Supreme Lord, has a friendly relationship with the devotees, is merciful towards those who are ignorant, and he avoids those who are envious. One has to raise himself at least to the stage of a second class devotee and thus become eligible to know the absolute truth. A third class devotee, which is the Uttamadhikari. So essentially, Prabhupada is talking about the Kanishtadhikari, the Madhyamadhikari, and the Uttamadhikari. A third class devotee, therefore, has to receive the instructions of devotional service from the authoritative sources of Bhagavata. The number one Bhagavata is the established personality of devotee, and the other Bhagavatam is the message of Godhead. So there are two types of Bhagavata. One is the person Bhagavat, and there is the book Bhagavat. Both of them are considered Bhagavat. The third class devotee therefore has to go to the personality of devotee in order to learn the instructions of devotional service. Such a personality of devotee is not a professional man who earns his livelihood by the business of Bhagavat. Such a devotee must be a representative of Shukadev Goswami, like Suta Goswami, and must preach the cult of devotional service for the all round benefit of all people. So, the person Bhagavata is not interested in preaching for the purposes of profit or earning a living. The person Bhagavata is interested in sharing this knowledge for the benefit of all humanity. A neophyte devotee has very little taste for hearing from the authorities. Such a neophyte devotee makes a show of hearing from the professional man to satisfy his senses. This sort of hearing and chanting has spoiled the whole thing. So one should be very careful about the faulty process. The holy messages of Godhead, as inculcated in the Bhagavad Gita or the Srimad Bhagavatam, are undoubtedly transcendental subjects. But even though they are so, such transcendental matters are not to be received from the professional man, who spoils them as the serpent spoils milk simply by the touch of his tongue. So Prabhupada has frequently warned us that we should not hear scriptures from those who are utilizing scriptures to make a profit for themselves. A sincere devotee must therefore be prepared to hear the Vedic literature, like the Upanishads, Vedanta, and other literatures left by the previous authorities or Goswamis for the benefit of his progress. Without hearing such literatures, one cannot make actual progress. And without hearing and following the instructions, the show of devotional service becomes worthless and therefore a sort of disturbance in the path of devotional service. Prabhupada has said a lot of people perform rituals just for the sake of pomp, but not for the true purpose, which is to develop love for the Supreme Lord. Unless, therefore, devotional service is established on the principles of Shruti, Smriti, Purana, or Pancharatra authorities, the make show of devotional service should at once be rejected. So many people may consider themselves to be very pious and very holy, very adherent to scriptures, etc. But many of them may be doing it without experiencing any great love for the Supreme Lord. So this is what Suta Goswami is saying is a waste of energy. You're only making a show of it, as Prabhupada is saying here. You're performing big puja, but your heart is actually not getting cleansed through the process of pure bhakti. An unauthorized devotee should never be recognized as a pure devotee. By assimilation of such messages from the Vedic scriptures, one can see the all-pervading localized aspect of the personality of Godhead within his own self constantly. This is called samadhi. So, if you want to realize the Paramatma feature of the Lord, you have to follow that Ashtanga yoga process and go all the way up to samadhi. If you stop somewhere in between, then that is also an absolute waste of time and energy, because in your next life you have to start all over again. So that is also a frustrating element of um, practicing dhyana yoga, that you have to be successful in one life, otherwise you start all over again. Okay, we can take up the next shloka. Atah pumbhirdvijashreshtha
Atah pumbhirdvijashreshtaah
varnashrama vibhagashah
varnashrama vibhagashah
manushtisthasya dharmasya
vanushtitasya dharmasya
samsiddhirharitoshanam.
samsiddhir aritoshanam.
Word for word meaning. Ataha.
Ataha.
So.
So.
Pumbhihi.
Pumbhihi.
By the human being.
By the human being.
Dvijashreshthaah.
Dvijashreshtaah.
O best among the twice born.
O among the best. O among the. O best among the twice
among
born.
the twice born. Varna ashrama.
Varnashrama.
The institution of 4 castes and 4 orders of life.
The institution of 4 castes and 4 orders of life.
Vibhagashaha.
Vibhagashaha.
By the division of.
By the division of.
Swanushtitasya.
Swanushtitasya.
Of one's own prescribed duties.
Of one's own prescribed duties.
Dharmasya.
Dharmasya.
Occupational.
Occupational.
Samsiddhihi.
Samsiddhihi.
The highest perfection.
The highest perfection.
Hari.
Hari.
Personality of Godhead.
Personality of Godhead.
Toshanam.
Toshanam.
Pleasing.
Pleasing.
Translation. O best among the twice born,
O best among the twice born,
it is therefore concluded
it is therefore concluded
that the highest perfection one can achieve
that the highest perfection one can achieve
by discharging the duties
by discharging the duties
prescribed for one's own occupation
prescribed for one's own occupation
according to caste divisions
according to caste division
and orders of life
and orders of life
is to please the personality of Godhead.
is to please the personality of Godhead.
Yes. So in this particular shloka, the conclusion has been reached that ultimately, actually, all varnashrama dharma and the occupational duties should be performed only for the satisfaction of the Lord and for nothing else. So Prabhupada writes, human society all over the world is divided into 4 castes and 4 orders of life. The 4 castes are the intelligent caste, the martial caste, the productive caste, and the laborer caste. These castes are classified in terms of one's work and qualification and not by birth. Then again, there are 4 orders of life, namely the student life, the householder's life, the retired, and the devotional life. In the best interest of human society, there must be such divisions of life. Otherwise, no social institution can grow in a healthy state. Prabhupada is emphasizing that everybody has to go through this kind of training, provided, of course, you have the necessary backings from an intelligence and quality standpoint. Without that, no society can be in a healthy state. So the varna is important, ashrama is also important. And in each and every one of the above mentioned divisions of life, the aim must be to please the supreme authority of the personality of God. This institutional function of human society is known as the system of varna ashrama dharma, which is quite natural for the civilized life. The varnashrama institution is constructed to enable one to realize the absolute truth. It is not for artificial domination of one division over another. When the aim of life, that is the realization of the absolute truth, is missed by too much attachment for indriya preeti or sense gratification, as already discussed herein before, the institution of the varnashrama is utilized by selfish men to pose an artificial predominance over the weaker section. In the Kali Yuga or in the age of quarrel, this artificial predominance is already current. But the saner section of the people know it well that the divisions of castes and the orders of life are meant for smooth social intercourse and high thinking self realization and not for any other purpose. And this last statement of Prabhupada in this purport is very important. Herein, the statement of Bhagavatam is that the highest aim of life or the highest perfection of the institution of the varnashrama dharma is to cooperate jointly for the satisfaction of the Supreme Lord, which means the 4 varnas, the 4 ashramas have to come together and do everything in cooperation solely to please the Lord. This is also confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita, Shloka number 13 of chapter 4. That takes us to the 14th shloka. Tasmadekena manasa
Tasmadekena manasa
Bhagavan Satvatam Patihi
Bhagavan Satvatam Patihi
Shrotavyah Kirtitavyascha
Rotavya Kirtitavyascha
Dheyah Pujyascha Nityada.
Deyaf Pujyascha Nityada.
Word for word meaning Tasmat.
Tasmat.
Therefore.
Therefore.
Ekena.
Ekena.
By one.
By one.
Manasa.
Manasa.
Attention of the mind.
Attention of the mind.
Bhagavan.
Bhagavan,
the personality of Godhead.
the personality of Godhead.
Sattvatam,
Sattvatam,
of the devotees.
of the devotees.
Patihi,
Patihi,
protector.
protector.
Shrottavyaha,
Shrotavyaha,
is to be heard.
is to be heard.
Kirtitavyaha,
Kirtitavyaha,
to be glorified.
to be glorified.
Cha,
Yeah,
and
and
dhyeyaha,
dhyeyaha,
to be remembered.
to be remembered.
Pujyaha,
Pujyaha,
to be worshipped.
to be worshipped.
Cha,
Cha,
and
and
nityada,
nityada,
constantly.
constantly.
Translation.
Therefore,
With one pointed attention,
with one pointed attention,
one should constantly hear about,
one should constantly hear about,
glorify,
glorify,
remember,
remember,
and worship the personality of Godhead,
and worship the personality of Godhead,
who is the protector of the devotees.
who is the protector of the devotees.
So, again, an emphatic conclusion, and we'll just discuss this briefly. Prabhupada writes, if realization of the absolute truth is the ultimate aim of life, it must be carried out by all means. In any one of the above mentioned castes and orders of life, the four processes, namely glorifying, hearing, remembering, and worshipping, are general occupations. Which means if you want to know who the Supreme Lord is, you have to do these four things. You have to hear, you have to glorify, you have to remember, and you have to worship. These are four things that we have to be absorbed in. Without these principles of life, no one can exist. Activities of living being involve engagements in these four different principles of life. Especially in modern society, all activities are more or less dependent on hearing and glorifying. Any man from any social status becomes a well-known man in human society within a very short time if he simply glorified truly or falsely in the daily newspapers. Sometimes political leaders of a particular party are also advertised by newspaper propaganda, and by such a method of glorification, an insignificant man becomes an important man within no time. Definitely, you see this in Kali Yuga. But such propaganda by false glorification of an unqualified person cannot bring about any good, either for the particular man or for the society. There may be some temporary reactions to such propaganda, but there are no permanent effects. Therefore, such activities are a waste of time. So, we shouldn't glorify and praise ordinary people. You can recognize them for their good deeds, but unnecessary praise and glorification of people who are not qualified is simply a waste of time. The actual object of glorification is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who has created everything manifested before us. We have broadly discussed this fact from the beginning of the Janmadhyasya Sloka of the Bhagavatam. The tendency to glorify others or hear others must be turned to the real object of glorification, the Supreme Being. Because why? When you glorify the Supreme Lord, it will bring you happiness. That's what Prabhupada is stating here. So, which will then take us to the last shloka that we will do for today, which is shloka number 15. Yad anudhyasina yuktaha
Yad anudhyasina yuktaha
karma granthi nibandhanam
karma granthi nibandhanam
chindanti kovidastasya
Chindanti kovidastasya
ko na kuryat katharatim.
ko na kuryat katharatim.
Word for word meaning. Yat,
Yat,
which.
which.
Anudhya,
Anudhya,
remembrance.
remembrance.
Asina,
Asina,
sword.
sword.
Yuktaha,
Yuktaha,
being equipped with.
being equipped with.
Karma,
Karma,
reactionary work.
reactionary work.
Granthi,
Granthi,
knot.
not.
Nibandhanam,
Nibandhanam,
internet.
internet.
Chindanti,
Chindanti,
cut.
cut.
Kovidaha,
Kovidaha,
intelligent.
intelligent.
Tasya,
Tasya,
his.
is.
Kaha,
Kaha,
who.
who.
Na,
Na,
not.
not.
Kuryat,
Kuryat,
shall do.
shall do.
Katha,
Katha,
messages.
messages.
Ratim,
Rathim,
attention.
tension.
Translation. With sword in hand,
With sword in hand,
intelligent men
intelligent men
cut through the binding knots
cut through the binding knots
of reactionary work,
of reactionary work.
karma,
Karma,
by remembering the personality of Godhead.
by remembering the personality of Godhead.
Therefore,
Therefore,
who will not pay attention to his message?
who will not pay attention to his message?
So Prabhupada writes, the contact of the spiritual spark with material elements creates a knot which must be cut if one wants to be liberated from the actions and reactions of fruitive work. So when the soul comes into contact with conditioned life, then attachment grows for anything and everything. Then pursuing the path of liberation obviously becomes challenging and difficult because of one's attachment. Liberation means freedom from the cycle of reactionary work. This liberation automatically follows one who constantly remembers the transcendental pastimes of the personality of Godhead. This is because all the activities of the Supreme Lord, His Leela, are transcendental to the modes of the material energy. They are all attractive spiritual activities, and therefore, constant association with the spiritual activities of the Supreme Lord gradually spiritualizes the conditioned soul and ultimately severs the knot of material bondage. So, if we know that we are trapped in this material world because of our attachment to various things and relationships, then how can that knot, that very tight knot of attachment, be broken unless you first begin to hear about the Supreme? So it begins with hearing, and the more you hear, the more you understand the Lord. The more you understand the Lord, the more you remember the Lord, and the more you remember the Lord, then through that process, that knot of tight attachment gets slackened and ultimately cut off. Liberation from material bondage is therefore a byproduct of devotional service, which means you don't have to go in search of moksha separately. You will get liberated from all kinds of attachments, even when you are in this material world, simply by performing bhakti. You don't have to run off to the mountains or read the scriptures and learn the scriptures. Liberation is also a byproduct of devotional service, just like jnana and vairagya are also a byproduct of performing bhakti. Attainment of spiritual knowledge is not sufficient to ensure liberation, which means you can read the Vedic scriptures, you can memorize shlokas, you can be an expert in the Vedic scriptures and tarka and logic and whatever else. No liberation is guaranteed for you there. Such knowledge must be overcoated with devotional service. so that ultimately the devotional service alone predominates. So even if you do want to study the scriptures, then it should be couched in bhakti. Then it is beneficial for you. Then liberation is made possible. Even the reactionary work of the fruitive workers can lead one to liberation when it is overcoated with devotional service. So Prabhupada is saying, even if you are a karmi, as a karmi, if you begin to perform bhakti, even then it can lead you to liberation. Karma overcoated with devotional service is called karma yoga. Similarly, empirical knowledge overcoated with devotional service is called jnana yoga. But pure bhakti yoga is independent of such karma and jnana, because it alone can not only endow one with liberation from conditioned life, but also award one the transcendental loving service of the Lord. So you get 2-in-1 bonus. You learn to love the Supreme Lord, and you also get liberated. Therefore, any sensible man who's above the average man with a poor fund of knowledge must constantly remember the personality of Godhead by hearing about him, by glorifying him, by remembering him, and by worshipping him always without cessation. That is the perfect way of devotional service. The Goswamis of Vrindavana, who were authorized by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to preach the bhakti cult, rigidly followed this rule and made immense literatures of transcendental science for our benefit. They have chalked out ways for all classes of men in terms of the different castes and orders of life, in pursuance of the teachings of Srimad Bhagavatam and similar other authoritative scriptures. So, this whole bhakti process, as we said, begins with hearing and chanting, and ultimately it leads you to prema bhakti. So, the multiple conclusions are reached in these 5 shlokas. The final conclusion comes in Shloka 13, where it says that the whole purpose of this varnashrama system is samsiddhir haritoshanam. It is to please the Supreme Lord. So if we water the root, all other parts of the plants automatically get nourished. So if we learn to please the Supreme Lord, then everything will be sublime in our life. And the 14th shloka says, if we hear the Lord, if we hear about the Lord, if we glorify the Lord, we can remember the Lord, we can worship the Lord. But we have to do this with a single pointed attention and purpose. So the whole focus is bhakti again in shloka number 14. And in shloka number 15, it says, what is the qualification to practice this bhakti? One only needs to have faith in the Lord's message. So unless you hear about the Lord, how can you remember the Lord? If we don't remember the Lord, how can we break the knots of material bondage? And this knot is so thick, not just in one life. This knot is so thick over multiple lives. We are so deeply attached to material things and family and relationships. How can such a thick knot be broken without first starting this journey by hearing about the Lord, by glorifying the Lord, then remembering the Lord? Slowly, the knot will get slackened. That is the only way in which we can actually achieve prema bhakti, pure love for the Supreme Lord. So, again, concluding these particular shlokas. So from shlokas 8 to shloka 15, the summary of these shlokas is that the whole purpose of performing varnashrama is to learn how to love the Supreme Lord. That's the ultimate summary of these specific set of shlokas. So in the next session, we will go to the next segment, and let's take a look at that segment quickly here. So we know what we're going to be covering in chapter 2. So today we finished 11 to 15. So let's look at this. So far we've talked about Sutta Goswami's reply to the first two questions of the sages. And from shlokas 8 to 15, the summary is that only bhakti is to be gained by performing one's prescribed duties and responsibilities. So next class, we will look at the next section. We'll begin the next section, which is from shloka 16 to 22. What are the various stages of bhakti? Which is, how does bhakti actually progress? Now that bhakti has been established as the topmost transcendental process for each one of us to follow, what are the stages that we're going to go through once we begin to practice bhakti? So join us next Sunday. It'll be really, really interesting for us to find out what stages that we are going to undergo as we begin this, or as we have started already this particular process.